Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to do the poem A River by A.K. Ramanujan. A River by A.K. Ramanujan is a four-stanza poem that is separated into uneven sets of lines. The first stanza contains 16 lines, the second 11, the third 7, and the fourth 15. They do not follow a specific rhyme scheme, but there are moments of repetition which help create rhythm. Most clearly, there is a refrain that is used in the second stanza and the fourth and is only slightly changed. The speaker describes what happened during the particular flood and then restates the same thing. This works in two ways. First, to emphasize the loss, but at the same time, it also desensitizing the reader. One comes to expect tragedy, as those who reside in the city do, and see it as another aspect of flood or drought. The poem begins with the speaker stating that every year, every poet sings the same songs about the sometimes flooding and sometimes empty riverbed. When it is empty, all its hidden items are exposed. The poets have always sung about this period and the other in which the flood happens, but they do not get into the details of who is impacted. In the next stanzas, the speaker relays the words of the citizens of this area as they describe what happened this year. Houses were washed away, as were 2 cows and a woman who thought she was pregnant with twins. The speaker derides the old and new poets for not caring enough to look deeper into their environments. The poetic techniques in A River. Ramanujan also uses a variety of poetic techniques such as alliteration, assonance, consonance. Assonance is repetition of vowel sounds. Consonance is repetition of consonant sounds, and enjambment to unify the text. Alliteration occurs when the words are used in succession or at least appear close together and begin with the same letter. Assonance and consonance are other forms of repetition in which a vowel or consonant sound is used multiple times in words that close in proximity. A few of these are noted within the body of the text. Enjambment is another important literary technique. This occurs when a line is cut off before its natural stopping point. It forces a reader down to the next line and the next quickly. One is forced to move forward in order to comfortably resolve a phrase or a sentence. A great example is between lines 4 and 5, in which a reader has to move down a line to find out what summer brings. All of these techniques contribute to the speaker's tone. It fluctuates back and forth between disappointed, analytical, and even light-hearted at times. Let me read the poem for you, then go on to analyze it. In Madurai, city of temples and poets, who sang of cities and temples every summer, a river dries to trickle in the sand, bearing the sand ribs, straw and women's hair, clogging the water gates at the rusty bars, under the bridges with patches of repair all over them, the wet stones glistening like sleeping crocodiles, the dry ones in the sun. The poets only sang of the floods. He was there for a day when they had the floods. People everywhere talked of the riches rising, of the precise number of cobbled steps, run over by the water, rising on the bathing places, and the way it carried off 3 village houses, a pregnant woman and a couple of cows, named Gopi and Brinda, as usual. The new poet still quoted the old ones, but no one spoke in verse of the pregnant woman, drowned with, perhaps, twins in her, even before birth. kicking the blank walls even before the birth. He said, "The river has water enough to be poetic about only once a year, and then it carries away in the first half hour 3 village houses, a couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda, one pregnant woman expecting identical twins with no moles on their bodies, with different colored diapers to tell them apart." In Madurai, city of temples, till the poets sang of the floods. In this first stanza, the speaker begins by setting the scene. He is going to be describing how the city of Madurai is described by poets. It's a place that is made up of temples and poets, and these poets have always sung of the same things. Every summer in the city, the river basin is emptied, the river dries to a trickle, and the sand is bared. The shapes and objects that are revealed are dark and somewhat ominous. There are sand ribs and straw women's hairs. These things clog up the water gates made of rusty bars. Ramanujan makes use of consonants in these lines with the repetition of the g sound. Rhythm is also created through the use and reuse of the word sand in the next in the lines 6 and 7. Then in general, the repetition of words beginning with sir or words that carry the sir sound. This is especially true for the first half of the stanza. Everything about the drainage system is old and in need of repair. The bridge is in patches, a fact that is revealed when the waters recede. In the last lines of this stanza, Ramanujan uses two metaphors to compare the stones to animals. The wet ones appear like crocodiles sleeping, and the dry as lounging buffaloes. Despite all of this, the poet only sang of the floods. There is so much more to the city that poets are ignoring. Second stanza. He was there for a day when they had the floods, ending with, and a couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda as usual. In this second stanza of a river, there are only 11 lines. The he in the first line is a reference to a poet, perhaps the speaker himself. He states that he was only in the city for a day. It is in this stanza that a number of the more complicated and personal details are revealed. The details were not hidden, they were easily learned by the poet featured in this stanza. Everywhere the people spoke about the flood and the terrible things which resulted. It is not just a simple natural occurrence, it carried off 3 village houses as well as a pregnant woman and a couple of cows. The cows have names, making these lines lighter in tone than some of the others. The list-like way in which this section of the poem is conveyed makes it clear that these are not uncommon occurrences. The people are used to them. Moving on to the stanza 3, the new poets quoted the old poets. Till before birth. The problem that the speaker has with the poets is made clearer in the third stanza of A River as he speaks of the similarities between old poets and new poets. Both spoke about the floods, yet ignored the tragedies which resulted. In fact, to make it worse, the new poets copied what the old ones did. There was no evolution in style or subject. In the 5th and 6th lines of this section, the speaker states that it is possible that the woman who died was going to give birth to twins, increasing the life lost. This is a very interesting contrast to the flooding of the river in the first place. The waters are meant to fertilize the land and make it possible for the next crop to grow. Life is destroyed as it is being created. He said the river has water enough to be poetic about only once a year, and then it carries away in the first half hour 3 village houses, a couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda, and 1 pregnant woman expecting identical twins, with no moles on their bodies, with different colored diapers to tell them apart. In this final stanza, the speaker relays the words of the poet again. He says that the poet complained of how the river has water enough to be poetic about only once a year. It is only once a year that the poets pay attention to it, and even then, they don't want to speak about the loss of property or life. The speaker repeats a section of the second stanza again, restating what was lost. There are additional details added. Now he says that the woman believed she was expecting identical twins. They were going to be perfectly the same, with no way to tell them apart, except through dressing them in different colored diapers. This is another humorous line, but it has a darker undertone. It speaks of the lack of care with which the poets approach the land and people. There is no desire to know who these people are or quest to adequately depict their suffering. I hope you liked this different aspect of presenting a poem on the river by A.K. Ramanujan. This much for today. Thank you.